So just a couple things, housekeeping things also about using GoToWebinar. If you do have questions, you can go ahead and type them in the question box there, which is on the top right of your screen. You may need to open it up. It's a little panel, and you can click open on that, and the questions will pop up. So if you do have questions, feel free to do those, and you can always also get in touch with us afterwards if you have questions about all of that. So I'd like to now introduce our two panelists, Teri Eastburn and Lisa Gardiner, both from Spark at UCAR/NCAR. And Teri and Lisa, welcome.
Hello.
All right, so thank you both for joining us. I've had the pleasure of working with both of you for several years now as I've been at Facing the Future, and I can't say enough about the work that you all do there at what is now called Spark, and appreciate you both joining us here today. So Teri, if you could start off and just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Spark.
Sure. I manage the school and public programs, so I see about 15,000 people a year, and some of those certainly want to know about climate change. So it's a topic that I'm really passionate about. I also did my thesis actually on communicating climate change ways back, but so I'm looking forward to talking to you all about it and learning a little bit about those of you out there as well. And I've been at NCAR for about 12 years.
All right, great. Thank you, Teri. And Lisa, how about you?
Hello. Well, my background is in science. I have a PhD in geology, and I used to study fossils, but I am just completing a MFA degree in creative nonfiction writing, and I help people learn about science in various ways, writing for websites and museum exhibits, creating illustrations, curriculum projects, that sort of thing. And today I'm going to talk a bit about telling stories about climate.
All right, that's right. I forgot you are a multi-talented artist as well. I forgot about that. That's great. So, and then if you could also tell us just a little bit about all the amazing things that you do at Spark and what UCAR and NCAR are.
Oh gosh, okay. So this could take half an hour. No, wait, I'll keep it down. So we're from a group called Spark, which is at UCAR, the organization that manages NCAR, the National Center for Atmospheric Research. We're located in Boulder, Colorado, and our role at Spark is to help connect the climate and weather research that's done at the National Center for Atmospheric Research with K-12 teachers and students, with college students, and with communities. And this is the front page of our website, which is spark.ucar.edu. And we recently relaunched our website, so we're very excited about it, although still clearing up the bugs. But we hope that people can learn more about science and apply it to their lives and their communities through the resources here and through the programs we offer. So please browse around the website. In the Learning Zone, there's a lot more content about climate science and weather as well, but climate is the topic we're talking about today. And then the Visit NCAR link, if you're in the area, you can come visit Teri's group and ask all your climate questions in person.
That's right. All right. So, and we're also just curious about who is here in the audience here. So we've got a couple of questions here. I'm going to launch our first poll just asking what grades or ages do you teach with? And that should be popping up on your screen there momentarily. And when you see that, go ahead and tell us about who you are, please. So it looks like folks are busy voting here, and we'll close this out in a sec and see what we have. Okay. Well, all right, so it looks like everybody who's voted probably is going to vote. So why don't we go ahead and close that poll, and we'll share it and see who's here. Looks like we've got people from middle school and elementary school. So thank you both for joining us, and hopefully you'll find something here in the resources that we're going to be talking about today. All right. So just briefly, I also want to tell you about the organization I work with, Facing the Future. We're based in Seattle. We're a nonprofit organization. It was founded in 1995. And as a nonprofit, our goal really is to create tools for educators that can help you and your students be equipped and motivated to develop critical thinking skills and build global awareness and be engaged in positive solutions for what we would hope to be a sustainable future. So we do that by creating educational resources, be they teacher's guides, student textbooks, curriculum units, and offering professional development such as webinars like this, or attending conferences or going to schools and districts and doing workshops for groups all around the country. So we do that. We work with about 1.5 million students every year that use our curriculum, and it's used in all 50 states and over 120 countries around the world now, so that's always kind of exciting about us. Our materials are interdisciplinary, so they're used in science, language arts, literacy, math, social studies, and other subjects in all grade levels K through 12, and also in pre-service and early college education programs also. So that's our website there is facingthefuture.org. You can learn more about us there, and we'll have more links through the talk as we go. I'm also curious to learn about folks here, what primary subjects you all might work in. So you can click as many as you want and tell us about what subjects you're teaching, please. Alrighty, so let's see here. Looks like most everybody that's voted probably is going to vote, so we'll go ahead and close that out and take a look at who's here. So it looks like about half of you are language arts and literacy, and the other half would classify yourselves as being in the STEM field, so that's great to hear. So nobody says they do a little bit of everything, but that's all right. So I also want to just ask 2 questions, and we're not going to do these in depth, but when I do workshops in person with people, one of the questions I like to ask will pop up on your screen there, and it's basically asking, you know, in 50 years, I think the world will be, and asking you to answer that question in 3 words or less if you can. All right, here we go. Oh, that didn't work very well. I apologize for that, folks. So if you imagine those 3 words that you might think of how you want the world to, or how you think the world's going to be in 50 years, that's one way to kind of shape things. And then the other question that I like to ask folks then is in 3 words also to describe how you want the world to be. And you can imagine that some of the differences might be that we have in our answers of how you think you want the world to be versus how you want the world to be. And that's really ideally what we're working towards with the curriculum and the workshops that we provide at Facing the Future, is to help you and your students really develop the understanding, the tools you need to ideally create the world that you want. And that's, let's say that we're all going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya and the world is going to be a better place, but that by doing that, you know, students are equipped to really think critically about issues facing them, such as climate change. And that quote that you see there from Paul Hawken is one that I like to share. He, once upon a time, was a founder of a gardening tool catalog. Smith & Hawken has since gone on to be more of a speaker, an entrepreneur, an environmentalist. And I like the quote where he's talking about, you know, if you're not pessimistic when you look at the data, then you're not understanding it. And if you're not optimistic when you meet the people who are working on these challenges, then you probably haven't got a pulse. And I think that really does kind of embody what also we all as educators are working towards, is to help our students understand these big challenges and help them create the world that they want to have by being able to think critically about it, understand the interconnections between global issues, and leverage points that we have to work on them. And lastly, I'm just curious to hear which time zone do you all live in, where folks are calling from. And I realize that this doesn't necessarily encompass everybody here, but most of us are probably in the 48 states or somewhere else in North America. So thank you all again for joining us, whatever time zone it may be, and tell us where you're at the moment, please. Alrighty, let's see if anybody else is going to finish voting, and then we'll go ahead and close it out and see where we're at. All right, so let's take a look. It looks like we're pretty split. So about a third of us are on the West Coast here, a third of us are on the East Coast, and a third of you are somewhere else in the world. And I thank you for putting up with my poor multiple choice questions, but that was the best way I could figure out how to phrase that. So thank you all for joining us, and let's get back to what we're working on next here. So one of the things that we really embed or try to embed in all of our curriculum resources at Face the Future is this concept of sustainability and sustainable development. And the definition that we like to use is the one that you see there, the idea of meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And the other concept that I think is really informing my thinking these days is the idea that sustainability doesn't mean sustaining your lifestyle, but it means really making choices that can be done sustainably, meaning repeated over and over throughout time. I think there is a difference for that, and it sometimes can be challenging to think about. But I would also say that the resources that we're going to talk about here with Teri and Lisa, and that we have, I think, support really understanding that concept of what something needs to be sustainable. And so part of that is understanding that what's kind of come to be known as the three spheres of sustainability, the idea that for something to be truly sustainable, you need to take into account the societal, the economic, and the environmental impacts of any particular action or decision that you might take. And so it's really concerned with balancing those impacts, positive and negative, of those three pillars. And the goal is to keep our environmental house in order and have a healthy economy, and have that kind of society that we want to have that supports individual well-being and healthy communities. And ideally, by balancing these, we'll have a sustainable community for current generations and future generations as well. I want to shift gears a little bit now and talk more specifically about what we're going to be working on today, which is the climate change in the U.S. in particular, but also how we talk about it and how we teach about it. And what you're looking at there is a series of survey results from some work that was done by Howard Mason University and Yale University in their climate change communication project, or excuse me, George Mason University. And they call it Global Warming 6 Americas. And this started back in November of 2008, I think, was the first report, and they've done several in between. I just pulled a couple of the poll results. There are a few more out there, but you can take a look at the 6 different Americas that we have, and I'll briefly describe for you who they are. So when asked about their belief in climate change, the alarmed section of the U.S., which currently is about 13%, was 18% in November of 2008. They're the segment that's most engaged in the issue of global warming or climate change, and they're very convinced that it's happening, it's human caused, and it's a serious and urgent threat. And the alarmed are already making changes in their own lives and support an aggressive national response. The next group there, the 26% that's concerned, which is actually down from the 33% that was concerned in November 2008. They're convinced that global warming is a serious problem, and they support a vigorous national response. People who are members of this group have signaled their intention to at least engage in consumer action on global warming in the near term, but they're less personally involved in the issue and have taken fewer actions than the alarmed. The cautious group, which is the largest group now, was actually a smaller group back in 2008. But they believe that global warming is a problem, although they're less certain that it's happening than the alarmed or the concerned, and they do not view it as a personal threat and do not feel a sense of urgency to deal with it. And then the other groups going down the line, we have the disengaged group, which is a smaller percentage of 6%, do not know and have not thought much about the issue, and say that they could easily change their minds about global warming one way or the other. The doubtful group at 15%, which hasn't changed too much in size, but they were 11% 4 years ago, are evenly split among those who think global warming is happening and those who think it isn't, and those who do not know. So many in this group believe that if global warming is happening, it's caused by natural changes in the environment, and they believe it won't harm people for many decades, if at all. And they say America is already doing enough to respond to this threat. And the last group, the dismissive, like the alarmed, are actively engaged in the issue but are on the opposite end of the spectrum. And most of the members of this group believe that global warming is not happening, it's not a threat to people or nature, and they strongly believe that it does not warrant a national response. So couple different responses there, and what I'm curious to hear about is your own impression of, if you were to kind of typify the community that you live in, which of the 6 Americas that we just talked about would you say best typifies your community? And I apologize for lumping in the doubtful and dismissive into one. It's mostly because I only had 5 choices. So
I kind of wanted to call you on that, Dave.
I know. My statistics are not perfect, I realize. Alrighty, so let's see where we're at here. So it sounds like everybody who's voted is going to vote, so we'll go ahead and close this out and share it. And it looks like we're split about 1/3 to the top 3. So 1/3 are alarmed, 1/3 are concerned, and 1/3 are cautious, which is interesting to see. But nobody in the disengaged or doubtful or dismissive, or the 3 Ds, as I heard somebody talk about it once, which is always hopeful, but they are a large percentage of the population. I think right now they're basically about 1/3 of the population, about 31%. But the majority of the U.S. still, as throughout time, is about, what, 58% of the population believes in some shape or form that climate change is happening. Oops, let's move along there. So I'm going to shift gears here and turn things over to Teri, who's going to talk about communicating climate change. And Teri, you had some questions as well, I know.
Yeah, and I do want to jump into the meat, but I do have one question to ask all of you, and I'm asking it because the most important thing about communicating climate change, I think it's the number one, is to know who you're communicating to. And luckily for me, David's asked questions already, so I have a sense of who you are, and I'm certainly making some assumptions. I think what you usually find on these things is that people that are part of those 3D, doubtful, dismissive, etc., don't usually call in. So I'm really not surprised to see the communities that are here. And I think that's true, too, for people who come up to NCAR. We usually don't get the people who don't like to hear what the scientists have to say. So, so my question to you is if you're teaching climate change, are you apprehensive about teaching climate change?
All right, let's get that up there. So that poll should be popping up, and you all can vote for it if you're apprehensive or not. Or,
and you know, if you're just talk about it with people, if you're apprehensive just about talking about it too, it doesn't just have to be teaching to students.
All right, so I'm going to wait another few seconds for folks to vote who are going to vote, and we'll go ahead and close this out and share what we've got. Okay.
Great.
So it looks like we've got about 2/3 of us say we are apprehensive about teaching about it, and 1/3 say that they are not. And nobody went for my Alfred E. Newman.
What? Me worrying? That was cute. Thanks, Dave. Well, this doesn't surprise me either because it's a very politicized topic. And so on that first slide on communicating climate change, I had 2 words, and they were effective communication with an E and affective communication. And I want to really touch upon both of those words. As educators, we tend to really focus on being effective communicators. We focus on cognition and information, and you know, that's really important. But with this issue, it's equally important to pay attention to the affective, people's emotions, and that can actually enhance learning, or it can, depending on how we teach, it can certainly impact negatively learning as well. And the key to good communication, I think, is knowing who you're communicating with. So I want to start out actually with you just closing your eyes for a minute, and when you hear the word climate change, I'm hoping that an image springs to mind. And I'd like you, if you can, just to write down whatever image comes to mind for you in that writing space that you have there. Can you do that, Dave?
Yeah, you can write whatever you want in the question box, yes.
Yeah, so just tell me what image comes to mind.
If anybody feels like writing, please do.
Well, I'll keep talking, and we'll take a look as some words do come up. But what often happens when I've done this exercise in the past is that, goodness, sorry you guys, hopefully you're not seeing that. is that I get pictures of polar bears and things that are rather distant. And Dave, I'm not able to move the slides.
Oh, okay. Let me try that one more time. Try it now. There we go.
Okay, just slow at my end. So when people do this exercise, the image that comes up are things like polar bears, maybe grandchildren, and a lot of people look at this issue as something distant and very abstract. And one of the things I want to emphasize here, and hopefully we can get across when teaching climate change, is that climate change is happening now, and it's affecting us now. And the good news is Dave shared some of the information from the Six Americas report. And one of the good news is that we are seeing increases. We're making great strides on the whole issue of climate change. One thing that's really perplexed me is that in my 12 years here at NCAR, I've seen the science become more and more definitive of the cause of climate change being human-caused and that it's real, and the evidence is really overwhelming. And yet, the perceptions from the public don't match up for a variety of reasons. But you can see right now all the numbers are really strong in terms of people's belief. That's up. There's a decline in denialists. And these figures are actually from this past September, so from September of 2012. And social science has really delved in to this issue of climate change. But when we look at these figures, the one thing that is still really low that I don't have written down here is that only 4 out of 10 people in the U.S. say global warming will harm them directly, or their family, or others in their community. But over 68% feel climate change will harm future generations. So the message isn't really getting out that it's happening now. But one way of knowing, it's a little study that I do, is that these figures that we're sharing go up and down and up and down and up and down. We tend to be rather fickle on the whole issue of climate change. And right now the numbers are up, and I bet you all know why they're up. In my estimation, they're up because of Hurricane Sandy. They're up because of the severe summer, the droughts that we had last year, the Texas droughts. All of these things help bring about change in the American mind. And that's really what this survey is showing. And when things happen, then we tend to sway a little bit towards believing in climate change. But the American public is a bit fickle on this whole thing. And you'll see that, and I'm sure you've seen that in your own life as well. I want to share with you, I'm hoping I can get there, there we go, just a little delay on my change, I think. As educators, I think it's really important to know what hat you wear. And when I say that, I really think that the struggle I see here at the National Center for Atmospheric Research and scientists is the same struggle that teachers face on this issue. Scientists, one of the values that scientists have are being objective, being seen as being unbiased and objective as much as they possibly can be. And a lot of scientists today, especially the younger ones, on such an important issue, they feel a need to be a bit of an activist, to really speak out, to go and educate the public and talk about actions and solutions. And for many people, and especially many scientists, that is a difficult thing for them to do, because when it comes to activism, scientists traditionally have not had to play that role. And in fact, many people think that it does jeopardize their objectivity. So I'm not going to tell you what to do or not to do as educators or those who are scientists, but just know in the classroom and as a communicator, the recommendation is to try to be as objective as possible, because when you take on other roles, your values start to show, and that often will alienate your audiences. The perfect example is Al Gore. Al Gore probably did more harm on climate change because he's known as a Democrat, and so that may have ostracized people who are of more conservative values politically. And so, you know, I sympathize with the scientists today because this is such an urgent problem. But to really separate your job as an educator versus your life outside of education as well. Another thing, teachers, the hat they wear is you are an expert. So the more you know about the subject will increase your confidence. That is a definite. Another thing about the pedagogy is that one of the most important things I think teachers can do is to help students understand what the nature of science is. Science has this checks and balance. It is based on evidence. It's not based on gut feeling or opinion. And the things that science puts out there is based on that evidence. And that's a distinctly different way of knowing that if the public truly understood that, I think we would have a little bit higher numbers really understanding what's happening with climate change as well. And I wanted to mention too that good pedagogy is also can be found in some of the research that has been undertaken on the subject of communicating climate change. There was a study done in Stanford that had on the news an expert on climate change, and they surveyed people that watched that news program, and they found that most of the people listened to what the scientist said and accepted it at face value. But when they did something similar with two opposing viewpoints, then the people were confused. So if you had a pro-climate change person and a climate denialist discussing their views, people were very confused, and they saw the whole climate change issue as a debate, when in fact there really isn't a debate in terms of what's causing what's causing climate change and if we're warming. And treating climate change as a debate makes the overwhelming evidence appear debatable. Treating it like a 50-50 issue illustrates a form of bias, really, and it gives the small minority view more credibility than it actually deserves. So you're ignoring the overwhelming evidence. So know when debates are appropriate and how you can frame them so they are appropriate in the classroom. And that's something I've seen a lot of educators do, unassuming of course, but you do kind of place in people's mind the fact that the science is debatable. And the evidence speaks or should speak for itself. So Lisa will laugh with this slide because she knows I tend to be overly thorough. And this is my approach, and this is just my natural inclination as who I am, is that when I talk on climate change or talk to people, I want to share everything I know. I want to take my brain and give it to them because I'm passionate about it. But in fact, the more you say, the less is often heard and that's just been proven through many studies. So simple, organized, and well-developed messages are really important. And also it's important to know that attitudes that are hostile on things like climate change, facts will not convince them. Okay, so what do you do when you have people that disagree strongly? You can see that knee-jerk reaction. You can see that look on their face that you are touching a nerve of theirs. Well, hopefully it's going to change here. Thanks, Dave. I don't know why I'm having a little trouble there.
It was probably me.
Okay. So the thing to do is always frame your messages around the values of your audience. And hopefully I'll give you some tools to do that. You obviously can't do this when you don't know your audience. And that's part of the value of really working to understand your audience before you engage. When you know where people stand on issues, you can frame in a way that you'll be heard. All right? A lot of people think of this and they say, well, isn't that being intellectually dishonest? And you're not being intellectually dishonest. You're communicating in a way that there'll be dialogue and discussion. And that's really important on this issue because we don't have enough of it, really. So I'm going to take you into the world of social sciences briefly. And this is just one theory as to why we disagree so much on this issue. And this is just one of many theories in the social sciences that have really, the literature is overwhelming on the whole topic of climate change communication. And this hasn't always been the case. Between 2004 and 2008, I have some friends who were doing a study on climate communication. And at that time, they really came up with only a handful of studies between 2004 and 2008. And then 2008 to 2012, it's just grown exponentially. We have hundreds of studies on climate communication now. And this one, the cultural theory or cultural cognition, is really getting the most traction. And what it says is that a lot of this work does come out of something called the Cultural Cognition Project I want to mention, and that's at Yale University. But basically what the theory states is that people's worldviews are aligned across a continuum of two opposing values. The first continuum that you see is across a worldview that's either you see the world as authoritarian and hierarchical or equalitarian. So authoritarian, a typical authoritarian would be someone who's very traditional in terms of family. I think of a lot of Middle East cultures where, you know, the woman is definitely subservient to male. Equalitarians, on the other hand, are, you know, people are equal, they have equal opportunity, it's your effort that gets you to where you end up in life. So they're really different worldviews. And then the other continuum is around those who are very individualistic and see the world singularly through a singular view versus much more community oriented. They think for the group, they're all for the group values. And so this is a bit of a continuum, and people fall somewhere within these quadrants. So a typical A person who's high on the hierarchy and individualist, stereotypically that might be someone who's a Wall Street investor who, you know, I'm going to get as much as I can, it's on me, don't regulate, I want as little regulation as I possibly can, and there's values that are either intrinsic to them or that they hold very closely just through their upbringing. A B person who's also very much traditional, authoritarian, hierarchical, and yet group-oriented, I think often traditionally or stereotypically as kind of a pastor type. And they tend to like what's good for the group, but still very, very traditional values. And it's important to know where people stand because you can frame arguments that might resonate with them more. So if you're an A person over there, I will frame climate change more around solutions. I'll talk about sustainable energy. I may bring up nuclear energy as an option. I may bring up renewable energy and leading the world in solar production and those types of things. So I'll touch upon their values. A B person, I may touch upon taking care of God's creation or things that will resonate with them. people on the bottom, the C's and D's, tend to be a little bit more open towards climate change. The D's are people that are, let's get going, we have to do what's right for the world versus the individual. So really that's the difference between these two. So the focus in terms of dismissive people tend to be on the high part of this issue. And people can be framed, or people's attitudes fall somewhere in here, not just about climate change, but about so many things. And so this is one theory that's really taken off in recent years. But the result of that is this, I think it's coming, is that we see the world, we root for our team, and we're very polarized because of these opposing values. And there may be evolutionary reasons. Our brains even may be structured differently. There's a lot of research around this now. And we've all been at games where people just blow up at the referee because they think our team did something wrong. And we are just darned and determined that they didn't, that our team couldn't do something wrong. And so that's what's happening here. And you can help the debate by really knowing the teams that they play on and the things they hold most dear. And this next slide really comes from the 6 Americans. And I just want to point out, oops, I went one too far. I just want to point out that under renewable energy research, those are the 6 American areas, 6 Americas, and you can see almost all of them are above 50% on renewable energy. So I like to tell people, when you are talking to parents or to your family members or even to students that come with really preconceived notions on things, that sometimes it's good to back into the discussion, or if you're not in a classroom, to just talk about solutions, because there's much more agreement on solutions. And I find this actually very, very hopeful, because solutions is what we want and what we should be debating. So sometimes you can head right here and find some common ground, and that is good news as well. So I just have a few more slides, and I wanted to bring up a term called the new normal. And what you're looking at in this graph is the heat wave of 2003 in Europe. And the graph starts in the late 1700s, and we're seeing June, July, and August summer temperatures from, well, it says, yeah, so that straight line through there at the 0 mark is a 1961 to 1990 average, okay? And the black squiggly line is the average temperature anomaly through those years. And the new normal is a term that people are talking about and using when we have all these severe events. And a lot of people are asking, are these severe events happening because of climate change? And actually, that is really the wrong question. Scientists and many people will tell you that 200 years ago we had severe weather. That is nothing new. The question is, or the right question is to ask, is climate change impacting severe weather? And indeed it is. As temperatures go up, the means and extremes of weather are increasing. And so in 2003, you see this severe summer event, and it's sitting on an increasing warming world. So that event may have happened 200 years ago, but it'll be slightly worse than 200 years ago because the world is warmer. So you'll see that a lot around severe weather events. And I just want to really stress that. There is a relationship. It's not the cause of the severe weather, but it does impact the severe weather. Okay? So another important thing to communicate around climate change is the urgency. And When I first came here to NCAR, one of our exhibits is on climate change, and it says the things that we can do to address climate change, adapting to it or mitigating it. I'm trying to advance, Dave, and I'm not going anywhere, so I'm not sure if you can do that for me.
Hopefully it'll pop up next here.
Yep. Okay,
There
so
we
here
go.
it is. So watch what happens over time. This is the late or the mid 1800s to about 2010. And what you should see, okay, so there you can see the sloping, the increase of global mean temperature for about 150 years. And then we look at the sloping line from basically the 1900s forward, and the slope is steeper. Next, we can look at it from the 1950s, and that green line is showing the slope increase still. And then if we look at the 1980s forward, it's still steeper. And what actually, I think that will come up again. One thing that I wanted to stress is that the warmest years on record have been in recent years. If you look at these years, the 12 warmest years on record globally, look at those years. They start with 2000, most of them. 1998 obviously was a little bit, but we are warming, and that warming is increasing. So encouraging people to change light bulbs and things like that, the actions are really important. But it's even more important to have a global action on this, and that's really difficult. There's no silver bullet, and when economics times are hard, the challenges become harder. I wanted to put this slide up because we're really not talking the science of climate change here. But if you read through the wealth of information on climate change, these are the 5 things that I encourage people to emphasize. That climate change is real now. It is bad for us, not just polar bears and ecosystems. It affects our health, our water, many other things. It is human caused. There's no other way to explain it. We can't attribute the warming any other way. We can solve this problem if we choose to, and that scientists agree on this topic. The agreement is around 97% that we are warming and it's human caused, and that is from evidence, not just gut opinion. So just to reiterate before we move on, these are my top 10, and they're not in any order. But I'll leave them here for you to look through to just really know your audience, tap into those values, and really listen to their values. People just want to know that they're at the table and that they can be heard. And you'll find that they'll listen a lot more to you if they're being heard, no matter how strongly they disagree with you. And debates really aren't the place in a science class. It's based on evidence. You have to frame them differently so that you're not showing something that's not true. Local is always good to emphasize. It's more relevant to people. Start with solutions with difficult audiences, and always be really respectful, listening. And last but not least, Lisa's going to touch a little bit about fear. And I think this is really important with kids. There are solutions, and I think that helps with students as well. Sometimes we can really make this issue heavy because there is such urgency around this. But there's also, you can make someone despondent over this as well. So just watch that and try to always bring solutions into the discussion too, to bring in a little bit of that things can be done. And last but not least, facing the future, how I came to know Dave is really through their great resources. I use them here at NCAR, I use them with students, and Dave will highlight some of these. But one thing that I think they really do best that we haven't really talked about is the connections to so many different issues globally. And so I'm going to leave that for Dave to talk about and let his resources speak for themselves on drawing some of these great connections globally.
All right, thanks, Terry, for talking about climate change. And before we hand things off to Lisa, I did want to ask one question of the group, which is just to see how many of us right now are currently teaching about climate change in some shape or form. So when that pops up, please go ahead and give us your answer there, and we'll see who is teaching climate change and who is not. And then we'll turn things over to Lisa, and she can talk about climate storytelling. So it looks like most everybody is busy voting here.
While people were voting, I just wanted to mention, I saw Tim had a question, or he put a mention of a great article in the question section. There was in I think it was December, in Scientific American, there was an article about how loss of Arctic sea ice can lead to changes in mid-latitude winter weather. And so, yeah, that was a really interesting article. It sort of says that things are all connected. The Earth is, you can't just affect one system, you affect them all.
Yeah, and it looks like about 2/3 of us, yes, are teaching climate change right now, and about 1/3 of us are not. So that's great to hear. So, Lisa, without further ado, I will turn things over to you here and give you control of the mouse. So go for it.
Okay. Where'd the slides go?
Oh, where did the slides go? There we go.
Oh, there they are. Okay, and I just press the forward and back arrows.
Yeah,
so,
that should do it.
Okay. Sorry, I forgot about that. Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa. You may remember me from the beginning. And I just wanted to tell you quickly about science storytelling and telling stories about climate change in particular. And when I use the term storytelling, I'm talking about true stories. I'm talking about nonfiction. And you know, climate change it's a hard story to tell to people. I know some of you teach elementary age kids, and you know that adds another complication to it because younger kids respond to stories differently too. It can also be a hard story to listen to, which is why I chose the lovely cartoon on the right here. That, you know, burying one's head in the sand, it's much easier if half the world turns to desert. It's true, but it's probably not the best idea. So one thing that we need to consider before we tell a story is who we're talking to, and so knowing where our audience is coming from, whether that's the students in our classroom or the people in town hall or the people in the elevator that you happen to be traveling up a 50-story building with who ask you about climate change, and you know that'll help you frame your story a little better. And also, what do they know about what's already going on? What have they heard? And there's a lot of misinformation out there, so it's good to know that. Press the button. Nothing is changing. Did I not do it right? How about this button? No. Here we are. Aha! Okay. So, as an example of where audience is coming from, I pulled the results of a survey done at Stanford. This one's done every year, and this one is particularly optimistic. In 2011, they found that 83% of Americans said that global warming is happening. That's exciting. That's a lot of people. But when asked why climate is changing, about 1/4 of the people said that humans were causing the warming, which is correct. About 50% said, or a little less, said that people were partially the cause. And in terms of recent warming, they're entirely the cause. And about 1/4 said that the warming is not caused by people. So we've got an important story to tell to help people understand that we're the cause and we can also be the solution. And so that that is important. Here I am trying to click on things. Oh, I don't think I have control over the mouse. Oh, here we go. Thank you. Okay, so, but first, our first obstacle in telling a story about climate change is that climate change can be abstract. And when telling people about climate change, you need to consider where you are on this ladder of abstraction. See ladder at the left. Now this ladder, I added in the picture to be concrete. But the ladder of abstraction is a way of thinking about whether things that we're talking about in our stories are abstract or whether they're concrete. And it's nice in a story to have a mix of things. If you're very abstract when telling someone about climate change, for example, you might want to add some concrete details to ground your story in reality. And likewise, if you're very concrete, if you've only got those sort of on-the-ground things happening, you might consider adding some abstract details to expand into larger concepts. So as what I just told you was very abstract, I'm going to follow it up with something concrete, which is the picture on the right there of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. And so this in an abstract sense, could be considered a tribute to national unity or division or sacrifice, or it could be a symbol of difficult times, or it could be lots of different things in an abstract sense. It has a lot of meaning. But in the concrete sense, it's a guy in a chair. And if we didn't have the guy in the chair, we wouldn't be able to, abstract it into and add meaning. So both are important. Okay, I think I have control over the slides. Feels good. Okay, so here's an example of using the ladder abstraction to tell a story or to help us find things to put into a story. And so I used here a non-climate story to keep things simple. My friend Sarah just got chickens, and the picture of the chickens is on the right there, just for your amusement. But so the very concrete detail is Sarah got chickens. So that is concrete. But then as we're moving up the ladder, I was thinking, and I didn't actually look this up, what percentage of Americans own chickens? That's a little more abstract. And then if we think about the impact of backyard chickens on the local food movement, that's a little more abstract. And then if we think about how fossil fuel emissions might decrease with less food transport, that's even more abstract. And so having, mixing in the abstract with the concrete sometimes helps people understand, and it tells a better story too. So moving on to oh, did I lose control again? Oh, here we go. Okay, moving on to a climate example. I was thinking, what should I use for a climate example? And I love the example of storm intensity, that climate change is affecting the intensity of storms. So we can expect to see more intense storms in the future. And I thought, well, that's really abstract if I'm telling a story. So then, I was thinking, well, Superstorm Sandy, there's an example. There's a concrete example. It was a superstorm because a winter storm merged with a hurricane in an area where those storms don't usually merge. And so that's pretty concrete, but we could get more concrete. What happened? Hurricane Sandy caused coastal flooding when storm surge hit during a high tide. So that's even more concrete. But we could get even more concrete. And so then I saw a headline from a newspaper that Nicole and Darcy Harper's house in Far Rockaway, New York, had flooded and is now full of mold. Well, that's pretty much as concrete as you can get. And so when you're thinking about these facts and when you're talking to your students about climate change, think about where you are on that ladder of abstraction. Are you talking about the house that was flooded? If so, add in a little science of how that happened and the bigger picture of how it relates to climate change. If you're talking about the intensity of storms worldwide, add in a little information about how that might affect individual people or how it has to ground that. And so that one trick to storytelling that I enjoy and I try to do. Okay, so and then one more thing that I think is really important is to acknowledge when we're telling our stories of climate change that fear really doesn't help. That talking about climate change as if it's a scary campfire story or the end is near kind of apocalypse situation, it might sell a Hollywood movie, but it doesn't motivate people to action that'll help us face the future in climate change. And so, some people get upset, some people will become desensitized, and they won't react. It just doesn't motivate people to long-term action. That having been said, let's not sugarcoat the facts. We shouldn't pretend that everything is fine. And so an analogy I like to use is, how do you tell someone they have a health problem, honestly? If you were the doctor and someone has high blood pressure, you want them to take that information in. That's a reality. And you want them to act on it without panic or feeling depressed or that sort of thing. You want them to make positive steps to face their high blood pressure. Well, the earth has high blood pressure, so let's, face the facts and then move on from there and take positive action. So our stories can help us do that. And we are running a little short on time, so I'm going to keep this short. But there is a wonderful researcher and communicator whose paper is cited at the bottom there, Richard Somerville and Susan Joy Hassel, 2011. They came up with a list of words that scientists use and that have a double meaning, that the public hears a different word. And I just wanted to point out one. It's the one that's repeated on here. So if you're paying attention, you can see which word is repeated on here, which was a complete accident. Sorry about that. But it's listed twice, really, because it's very problematic, and that's the word uncertainty. In science, there's always uncertainty. There's uncertainty in our measurements. We can always have better tools to make better measurements, and so, we could always be a little more certain. We also have uncertainty because there's variability in nature, and so, nature is not precise. There's always differences going on. For instance, not every hurricane follows the same path. That's variability in nature. So there's always uncertainty. We can't be absolutely sure. And that word to the public often means ignorance. But it's important to note that in scientific circles, you are absolutely never certain. The only thing you're certain about is that you're never certain in science. Otherwise, you're not doing great science. So the words we choose are important in our stories. Analogies can also be excellent. And there's a great cartoon that was produced at NCAR UCAR that I'd recommend you guys show to your students, especially the middle school teachers out there. The elementary school teachers might want to preview it, make sure it's appropriate. But it makes the analogy that greenhouse gases in our atmosphere act like steroids. The steroids of the earth. And so just like a baseball player gets better and better at hitting home runs when he's on steroids, with greenhouse gases we get warmer and warmer temperatures. But just like the baseball player can also strike out, we can get a winter storm. So, these things, it makes a great analogy. The video is just 2 minutes long, so it's a nice short little thing. And then to end on, I just wanted to note that one of the most important things, I think, is to take time to respond to the emotions of the audience you're talking to. You can be hopeful, but convey the urgency of the problem. And depending on who you're talking to, people might feel scared or angry or in disbelief. A researcher from University of Montana described it in a presentation once I saw as dealing with climate change is like dealing with the stages of grief. People go through denial, and then they're angry. They might bargain, like, well, if I just turn my lights off, can we solve this? They might get depressed, and finally they might accept it. So, this is it's a process, and that's why the cartoon on the right. People do get angry, and please, don't be scared off by that. Please do share stories of climate change and help people process the facts and develop plans for positive action. So I hope you all tell stories of climate to others, and thanks so much. Oh, and one final slide. We have a list of resources here. Dave, is it possible, do people get a copy of the slides so they get these links?
Yeah, it is. There'll actually be a link in the email that follows the webinar where folks can download them from our SlideShare site.
Excellent. All right.
Yes.
Most of the resources that I talked about and quite a few others are in this list, and ones Teri talked about too. So we hope they're helpful.
And yeah, we'll definitely give a second for the global warming steroids video. Explains it well, and also is quite engaging at the same time. So I'm glad you had that in there. And yeah, like I said, if you're interested in getting the slides, we'll have these up on our SlideShare account very shortly after the webinar, and you'll get a link to that also in the email that follows the webinar. So I appreciate folks for, sticking with us, and I want to just talk about a few things before we finish up here. One is the connection to some of the curriculum resources that we have. In particular, this time would be our climate change unit, which is it's a 2-week unit that's available for both middle school and high school. And it's an interdisciplinary unit that begins kind of with an introduction to climate change in the first week, and then looks more at the second week of widening and deepening students' understanding to its interconnections with other places. And so I'm going to briefly explain how this works and how you can get it. So like I said, the first week there, with climate being an interconnected issue that cuts across lots of disciplines, the curriculum is aligned with both national science and social studies standards, and it can be used in language arts classes as well. It has readings that accompany it. And so the first week really is the foundation for understanding some of the forces behind climate change, and students learn basic science, the basic phenomena behind climate, the carbon cycle and the greenhouse effect, and it kind of finishes up in that first week with an exploration of different energy sources and fuel types and how they relate to energy production. And then the second week is based around widening and deepening students' understanding of climate change and its connections to social, economic, and environmental factors. And so by the end of this, students will have a better understanding of how to think about the complex interconnections of climate and climate change and the issues that are related to it, economic, social, and environmental. And just as an example of that, I want to talk about one of the lessons in the second week, which is called Shopping Heats Up. And the idea behind this is that students are given different income levels, which are somewhat arbitrarily assigned, but also have an order in the big scheme of things. And they're asked to essentially take care of their basic human needs, so food, shelter, housing, things like that, and then think about what the impacts, social and environmental, are of their different resource choices and how they relate to carbon emissions and climate change itself. So if you can imagine for a second, the way this works is in your class, about half of the students would be given $200 as their budget, and about a third of the students would be given $1,500 as their budget, and the remaining 20% or so would be given $5,000 as their budget. And they're asked to then go shopping in the global mall here and meet their basic needs for food and fuel and shelter, and then think about if they can meet their needs for transportation and maybe a luxury item. And what students soon discover is that your income has a big effect on what you can buy and what your carbon impacts might be. And so that's, I think, one of the nice lessons that we have in that second part that really links to the social and environmental and economic impacts that climate change can add up to. And the culminating piece for this lesson is asking students to think about the impacts and to think about how their income related to and hindered or enabled their ability to think about climate change in their purchasing decisions. Also, just want to remind you there's 5 different readings that tie into the different lessons, and these are written at the appropriate grade level for both the middle school and the high school units. And so a lot of teachers like to use these as homework, or you can use them as in-class read-alouds also. And just lastly, the unit can be downloaded from our website, facingthefuture.org, and I wanted to mention one tie-in there. If you're looking for a way to get your students more, and your staff, actually your school for that matter, or your organization, more involved in looking at climate change, is the National Wildlife Federation. We've partnered with them, and they're part of their Eco Schools USA network, and they have it's kind of a tool and a program called the Cool School Challenge, which was actually started by a teacher here in Seattle, Mike Town, and has won a national award for it. But it allows students to look at really practical strategies of reducing carbon emissions through simple things like turning off lights, and through bigger issues of looking at where food comes from and how it's recycled at their school, and to account for all of their carbon emissions and look at reducing those. And it kind of sets it up in a competitive way, so it makes it engaging for students and staff to look at reducing their emissions, and schools like it because it actually saves money on energy, water, waste, transportation, all of the above. So you can learn more about that at our website, and also right there at NWF's Eco Schools website also. And just lastly, a couple things on our site. If you're looking for particular lesson plans, we have what we call our Global Sustainability Lesson Finder, where you can key in the grade level and the subject and the topics you're looking for, and it will pull up all the lessons and resources we have that fit that subject. And also, if you are teaching in a school or state where correlation to state standards is important, we have that available for the Common Core standards across all 50 states, existing standards for states that either have adopted Common Core or have other standards for things like social studies, science, and when the next generation science standards come out, we'll have correlations for those as well. And again, that you can access on our website. And lastly, the resources we do have, the climate change unit is but one of many. We've got teacher's guides, we have student textbooks, and we have other curriculum units as well, many of which have free previews or are entirely free online, and others are available for what I would say is a very low price. Also, one other thing I want to talk about, we are going to be kind of piggybacking on top of our climate change unit with a unit coming out this spring. We're part of the Northwest Advanced Renewables Alliance, which is looking at turning woody biomass into aviation fuel. So we're looking at biofuels in particular. And some might wonder why we're involved in this. And one of the reasons we're excited about doing this is they're looking at the full life cycle analysis of this to figure out if it really is sustainable to do biofuels in this way of taking the rather abundant woody biomass that we have here in the Northwest and turning it into fuel in some shape or form. And so we'll have a curriculum unit coming out for that as well, and if you're on our newsletter list, you'll find out about that later this spring. And then lastly, if you're on our newsletter list also, you may have already found out about our newest release, Exploring Global Issues, which is a 24-chapter textbook looking at the connections between large global issues and using the sustainability as a lens to look at those. And you can get a sense here of how this is structured, looking at how global issues and sustainability are tied together, and then we step through the basic human needs, looking at our ecological footprint, and then looking at how human health, security, and well-being are impacted, and then looking at the economic angle of things, and finally equipping students and teachers with the tools to think about creating sustainable communities through actions either locally or globally. So we do have a few more of these coming up, and the next one will actually be more specifically about our new Teacher's Guide and Student Textbook, Exploring Global Issues, and you can sign up for it there if you're not already. And that's how you can stay connected with us, all of our different ways there, and the links also that Lisa provided also as well will allow you to do that. So the survey will come up at the end of the webinar when you exit this, and it's really helpful for all of us to get your feedback. I certainly do appreciate that. And again, you'll get a link to the slides and an archived copy of this video if you want to share it with somebody else. And with that, I will leave you with this thought from Buckminster Fuller. And Lisa and Teri, thank you so very much for sharing your knowledge. And I hope you all have a good afternoon, and we'll be in touch soon. And thanks everybody for joining us and taking part, and hope you find a way to make use of it in your own classroom.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.